there, listeners. Are you feeling the weight of the world? Well, you're not alone. The U.S. Surgeon General says nearly 50% of parents are overwhelmed by stress. And guess what? It's affecting us all. Just last year, we heard about an epidemic of loneliness hitting half our population, especially young adults. But there's hope. I'm Scarlett Lewis, founder of the Choose Love movement. We're dedicated to your safety, health, and well-being with proactive mental health strategies. Imagine a life where stress and loneliness are replaced by joy and connection. We've already reached millions with essential life skills to prevent violence, substance abuse, and mental illness. Want to join this life-changing movement? It's easy. Visit chooselovemovement.org today. Become a member, spread the word, and access our free resources. Together, we can create a loving, supportive community. Remember, all the nurturing, healing love you give comes back to you tenfold. Thank you for choosing love.
I choose love. I choose love. Hey, hey. Hey, 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 oh.
The Choose Love movement offers no-cost solutions that keep our kids safe, providing them with the skills and tools they need to flourish. Join us in our mission to create the world we want to live in, one that's connected and compassionate. Check us out at chooselovemovement.org. Together, we can choose love.
Hey everyone, my name is Scarlett Lewis, and I am the founder of the Choose Love movement. Thank you so much for joining us on this Choose Love podcast. So I have two very special guests with me today, and this is a really, really important show. We're going to go through a story about our relationship. And it is one that I think is going to interest everyone listening very much. Most of you that are listening are aware that some people don't believe that the tragedy at Sandy Hook happened, and also are aware of the Alex Jones InfoWars proceedings that I've been a part of. Alex Jones started broadcasting on InfoWars the day of the tragedy, saying that he did not think that the school shooting that took the lives of 20 first graders and 6 educators happened. And so he continued to cast doubt on the tragedy for years. And a lot of people believed him. In fact, what came out at my trial that I wasn't aware of, the one in Austin, was that 1 in 5 Americans had doubts on the facts behind the Sandy Hook tragedy. And today I am with 2 people, actually a couple, and they were part of the people that did not believe that Sandy Hook had happened. And I just want to say right off the bat, these are 2 of my most precious and dearest friends today. I actually met Bonnie at one of the first schools that ever started Choose Love. She was an educator there. And David is her filmmaker husband. So I have introduced you both now, and I just thought that, and I really appreciate your courage to be vulnerable through this podcast and to share your story. And we're doing this because we think that it's going to help shed some light on why people don't believe, and what maybe the thought process was behind those that didn't believe, and also to model that people can have conversations and that there are good people on both sides. And so anyway, welcome, Bonnie and David. It's really an honor to have you here today.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Scarlett.
Scarlett. Well, Bonnie, ladies first. You go ahead.
Oh, thanks. Well, I feel like this today has been years in the making. It's been really 25, not 25 to 25 to 2016. So it's been almost 10 years. So
Yeah.
yeah. So, but what would you like me to talk about? Just,
So the tragedy happened in 2012.
mhm.
And I knew right away what I wanted to do. I saw Jesse's chalkboard message. I knew I had to be part of the solution. I knew what happened was 100% preventable. These are all things that I said the first time that we met, Bonnie, when you were
Yeah.
in the audience and listening to me speak at one of our very first schools that ever embraced the Choose Love program as soon as we put it out. And that was in 2016. So you were there, and
Yeah, I can share my experience if you want.
yeah, that would be amazing.
Okay, so basically, my husband and David and I had been really questioning a lot of things going on in, our country and, some things that we were confronted with in our lives. And just, I just remember, we had had conversations about, and um, we had been listening to Alex Jones. Some of the more notable would be things about like the Bohemian Grove and, things like that. And so we had heard through Alex Jones that people from the Sandy Hook Elementary shooting had been crisis actors and that it was rehearsed and, all these things. And it was just blowing our minds. Like, what? Like, what? Like, this really happens? Like, I'd never even I don't think we really even, or I should speak for myself, but I mean, I don't think I even really fathomed that that kind of thing could happen. I mean, years before I had been, you know, very sad with stories about like Columbine, the shooting, and there was a song that I really loved that was all about Casey. Uh, no, Richard, Rachel. What was the name of Rachel? Rachel's Tears?
Rachel's Challenge. That was
Rachel's Challenge. That's right.
Rachel was the first
Um,
student murdered during
yes,
Columbine massacre.
yes, and her story was just so powerful to me, and I felt so badly, and then to think that, somebody out there, people out there were faking it, like pretending like something like this had happened, and it really didn't. It was like really shocking, and but I think that, we were questioning a lot of things, in our world and our lives. And so when I found out that, Scarlett, you were going to be a speaker at the school that I was working at, I remember telling David, oh my gosh, like there's going to be a speaker from this supposed school shooting coming to our school. And I guess in my mind, I was thinking, this person's probably a crisis actor, I mean, but rationally, I wasn't thinking like, and she's coming to my school in New Mexico, that is, to speak to us, like, what's the purpose of that? What's the big to do about that or whatever? I wasn't thinking about it all rationally. And so I remember sort of being open-minded, but at the same time, I just didn't know, I wasn't sure because I was questioning things and I didn't know if he was telling the truth or not telling the truth, but I was really thinking that he might be right. I didn't know. And so I just listening to you, and watching you talk and share everything that you did that morning, it was so powerful to me. And, my heart absolutely went out to you and your family and to all the other families. And I just thought, how could that be? Like, how could that be? And here's someone talking so passionately about, so, and not only that, but she wants to offer solutions to the problem that we all totally want a solution to. And I was just fascinated. And so I just remember being approached by you and the principal to not only myself, but other teachers to be able to start teaching your curriculum. And I was very honored and privileged to be able to get a meeting with you for just a few minutes in between my classes and between kids coming in. And I became the Choose Love teacher. But before that same week, I think you were here for like maybe 3 days or something. And you were doing talks at every, I'm sure a lot of people, the listeners will identify with this, but Scarlett was there in person, just very personable, so genuine, so heartfelt, so present in the moment, and just really touched my heart. And I just felt an instant connection. And as I'm sure so many other people have when they met you, when they meet you. And basically, which I just felt drawn, and I thought, like, that a good time to talk to you might be, I asked my husband David, I think he was doing some filming, because I had also thought, like, well, maybe David could do some filming. And um and so anyway, I think you were there. It was the last night, and you were doing the parents presentation, the families and parent presentation. And afterwards, I just remember David and I talked about, like, well, maybe we should ask her if she wants to go to dinner and talk to her some more. And then so we kind of stood back to see, like, what's going to happen. Is she going out with someone else? Is she going to do something with the principal or something like that? And you weren't. So we were asked you, well, do you have any plans for tonight? And you said no. And we said, can we take you to dinner? And you said, sure. And so we had a chance to sit down and talk, and we just instantly formed a really amazing connection and bond, and it's just grown from there. And I I became a Choose Love ambassador for my state, and I did a lot of advocacy work here because I believe so much in what you're doing and what all the ambassadors and the people who are working with Choose Love do. And it's so important. And yeah, so I feel like I've gone from one complete end of the spectrum all the way to the other. So anyway.
That's really amazing. And so and I remember sitting with you, Bonnie, which is kind of interesting because I've been to one of the students asked me how many schools I visited, and I unfortunately haven't kept track, but I just go out and travel to schools and speak to kids and educators nonstop. And so for me to remember that meeting and sitting with you in that room side by side, going over the curriculum with you is pretty amazing. And then you made that call to David, and David, so I'm just curious, what were your thoughts in that first call? Because you guys had talked about it. I know Bonnie had given you kind of a heads up. Hey, there's a Sandy Hook parent that's going to come and visit the school. And I'm wondering what your thoughts were.
Yeah, I'll kind of back up further on the timeline and go back to like 2006, which was when I very first had Alex Jones come across my radar through a friend. And like Bonnie said, he said, just look up. Back then, the internet was a lot more, it was less restrictive. There weren't people canceling people. You could find just about anything. And he said, Google Alex Jones Bohemian Grove. And so I did, and I watched some videos and I saw some images and was just kind of like freaking out on that. Like, what the heck? There's all these world leaders that have been meeting for decades in the redwoods of California to set world agendas. Like, what? Like, and he infiltrated this place in 2000, and there was a giant stone owl, and on and on. Anyway, that was how I first came in contact through Alex Jones, and I was just fascinated. I mean, I still like a good conspiracy. I'm not gonna lie. They're fun. It's like, okay. And I remember you know, when Sandy Hook happened 6 years after that,
Wait, can
I
we go back? What's
sure.
so fun about a good conspiracy? I'm just curious. They're so fun, but like, what is it that intrigues you? I'm curious.
I suppose in one sense, you look at the world and you can sense that it's a complex world. There's stuff going on you don't always know. And to Alex's credit, he brought things to my attention that in fact proved to be true. Like, for example, the Gulf of Tonkin, which got us into the Vietnam War. My father was in the Vietnam War. He served 2 tours over there. And so you find out like, okay, this is declassified decades later that like, oh yeah, we sort of, you know, the president brought up an event that wasn't exactly what they claimed as a pretext to go to war. And it's like, and I wouldn't have known about that, but for listening to Alex Jones. So it's not like he's wrong about everything. But I think the conspiracies that, and I don't find some conspiracies I don't find compelling at all. Like to say we didn't go to the moon to me is just utter nonsense. I think of course we went to the moon. I mean, it's just so obvious to me that that happened. But there are those who believe we didn't or whatever, and so it's kind of that's what I mean by fun. It's just people are free to think whatever they want. You can believe whatever you want to believe. And so, but when Sandy Hook rolled around, it wasn't just Alex Jones. Back then, there were, I think what was happening, as I recall, was Alex's show was bringing up a lot of other stuff that other people had said, like, oh, look at this, Katie Couric's interviewing these people and this picture falls off the wall mysteriously, or, it looks like you speed up the footage and it looks like these people are running in circles around Sandy Hook that day. And I looked at that and, after listening to somebody for 6 years, you feel like you know them, even though you've never met. And it was just this sort of default setting of like, well, there must be something to this, or they wouldn't be talking about it. So as crazy as it sounds, it was that easy to just believe that, like, yeah, this doesn't seem right, and they're probably trying to take away our guns, and and stuff like that. So that was really how I got pulled into that, and it never occurred to me until we sat down across from you, which really, I remember when Bonnie said that, she's like, oh, this parent's here. And I'm thinking like, I'm like, a crisis actor, whatever. So to meet you, I thought, well, let's see. And as we talked, it was amazing how it was, and I'm going to attribute this to God working in my mind, and in my heart saying, and there's this saying, I don't know where the saying originated, but it said, when you hear hoof prints, think horses, not zebras. What's the more likely explanation? That there's this great conspiracy to stage a school shooting involving almost 20, well, more than 20 victims and a shooter that are all no longer here, and the media, and it's like, how easy would it be to pull that off versus this actually happened? There was another school shooting. It's not like this hadn't happened before. And so I felt just really convicted in that to think, like Bonnie said, as you talked, I just couldn't help but see like, okay, this is not an actor. This is a mother who lost her child. And it's really kind of, it's somewhat embarrassing to admit this so publicly, but it's just the truth. I was having to deal with these things confronting me like, wow, you were wrong. Your thinking was completely wrong. And
Oh, you were in good company for one thing, David, and even right now to have gone through that thought process, I've learned so much about people over the past 12 years since Jesse's murder. And I've begun to realize the amount of self-esteem and self-confidence it takes to make that statement. I was wrong. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like there's so much that goes into it. I wouldn't think before, I would think that people could just say, I was wrong. But you know what? Actually, they can't. And even apologies are difficult for people who lack self-esteem. You know what I mean?
and to be clear, I did not bring that up to you for years.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
was just gonna say
No,
the same thing. It was what, like 2 years ago?
about
It was
sounds
like
about right.
it was like 2 years ago or something like that when you were out here doing presentations and you came to our house and we were all sitting around talking and we both were like, look, we got to tell you something, like, because it was hard for us to, you know, I mean, we were convinced, but then there's a whole other layer, like she doesn't know that we used to think that. and, so it was like, and I didn't know, I mean, of course I know how you were going to take it because I know the kind of person you are and you live the formula, for choose love. And, we're grateful. I mean, I feel sad because I feel like that must have hurt. That must have hurt to know or to find out that people that you consider friends did think and feel that way. And
Actually,
with
I was more fascinated by the thought process behind that.
Yeah, and can we talk about that a little bit too? Because I think, for me, I'm just going to speak for myself. You know, the uh, the Alex Jones, and I'll full disclaimer, I still see value in Alex Jones. Like I don't look at him and think, oh, I can't believe what a horrible person he is. I mean, he's as flawed as the rest of us. He's not a perfect person. And yeah, he got some things wrong. And he's gotten quite a few things right, actually, I think. And it's just to say, it's not to try to draw.
Show that he did get a lot right, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think a long time, even before I'd heard of Alex Jones, I'd had this seed planted. I don't know how or where it was planted, but it was this fundamental belief that like the Second Amendment is sacrosanct and the government can't take it away. And so anything that moved in that direction, and I used to listen to AM radio back in the early 90s, and there were guys back then that were before Alex Jones was even out of high school, like, yeah, they're trying to take our guns. And so that kind of thinking had been sown a long time earlier. And then Alex was just kind of a reinforcement of that, so yeah. And when after listening to somebody for 6 years and then they say this thing is a hoax, you just sort of easily jump into the idea that like, well, yeah, it's a hoax. And the truth was I hadn't even considered the alternative. And I guess it says a lot about where we're at today. I look at the world right now and I see people are so polarized and they're so married to their ideology and they're so stuck on whatever it is they're stuck on. And I'm so grateful for our friendship and that you're a forgiving person, that's part of your formula is forgiveness. And that it just opened my eyes of like, wow, the world's really complicated. People are really complicated. Nothing is as it seems. My default now is I don't believe anything I hear anymore right off the bat. Like any headline, any news story, anything I hear, read, see, just I'm immediately skeptical about because it's a complex world. So anyway.
So can I just share that I think that there was a point of time when we were listening to Alex Jones, and I'm just going to be honest and say more David than me, but I feel like just because I'm more of the solutions oriented person, and I can't stay in that place of questioning and doubting and stuff for very long just because of my own background. And so I think that it was really hard to live in that place of not trusting and fear. And, I feel like it contributed to, things like depression. I just think that when I started noticing and seeing that, like, I can't live in that place anymore. I have to try to stay out of that. So I don't go in as in depth with the questioning, but I do believe that it's important to question. Everyone should question. We should not believe, just take someone's word, someone's word for it, what to believe, or be told what to believe. We should question and we should research for ourselves, but it's what's out there. What is out there for us to research with?
Strength that we can rise above. I choose love.
Hey there, listeners. Are you feeling the weight of the world? Well, you're not alone. The U.S. Surgeon General says nearly 50% of parents are overwhelmed by stress. And guess what? It's affecting us all. Just last year, we heard about an epidemic of loneliness hitting half our population, especially young adults. But there's hope. I'm Scarlett Lewis, founder of the Choose Love movement. We're dedicated to your safety, health, and well-being with proactive mental health strategies. Imagine a life where stress and loneliness are replaced by joy and connection. We've already reached millions with essential life skills to prevent violence, substance abuse, and mental illness. Want to join this life-changing movement? It's easy. Visit chooselovemovement.org today. Become a member, spread the word, and access our free resources. Together, we can create a loving, supportive community. Remember, all the nurturing, healing love you give comes back to you tenfold. Thank you for choosing love.
I choose love. I choose love.
Anyways,
I totally agree. I mean, I think that it was okay to question that because, for one thing, it was absurd. It was absurd that 20 first graders and 6 educators were massacred by a former student who shot his mother before leaving the house that morning, and that the response was ridiculous. And the fact that we can't keep our kids safe at school is absurd. So, I mean, for you all, you know, that is kind of like, that's where I'm coming from. For you all to have questioned that, I don't mind people questioning. I agree, Bonnie, 100%. And I am the same way, David. You know, I am more trusting, I think, but I do question things and I do seek the truth. I want to know the truth. And I see what's happened in the manipulation, even with the Remington trial. You know, I saw how I actually had a classroom from New York City all write me letters, and from you know, they were studying current events, and so they were studying the Remington gun trial for some reason, as well as the Alex Jones trial. And so all of these kids were saying, our teacher told us that without censorship, you know, violence occurs. And so we know that you would be for censorship. And we know that's what the Alex Jones trial is about. And going back to the Remington trial, we know that you're anti-gun because, you know, people kill each other with guns and we do need to take them away, you know, something like that. And I wrote them back and I said, you know, it's so interesting. Neither of those trials were about that at all. But you may have read, I'm sure your teacher read, whether she reads something leaning left or something leaning right, none of those news sources were accurate at all about either of those trials. Like the Remington lawsuit wasn't about guns. It was about marketing irresponsibly to minors. I mean, that's the reason that I decided to join that lawsuit. And the reason for the Alex Jones lawsuit wasn't censorship. It was not telling the truth. And you know, you cannot go on and have a national platform and go out and not tell the truth about somebody to their detriment. Thank goodness you can't do that. And so,
Yeah, you know, I think that was really where it could have been so different for, I remember catching pieces of that trial and what had, I don't know if I had heard a soundbite or something, but what he had said was like, part of his defense was like, hey, I'm an entertainer. I get a little hyperbolic. And the thing is he does definitely, I mean, he is entertaining. I mean, to me, he can crack me up. He can be so funny on his rants, but to go with the angle of like, oh, this is, you know, I'm just being an entertainer. It's like, no, dude, no, that is not the way anybody perceived you. You were the voice
a
of reason.
reporter.
You know, yeah, you were like a reporter. So I think he would have been better off to say, yeah, I really screwed this up. This was a huge mistake. I am so, I mean, that would have been a better strategy. And who knows? I mean, he's got lawyers in his ears, and who knows what they're telling him, and who knows? But I mean, I'll just be honest, Scarlett. You know, my hope has always been, my desire has been for somehow, some way to see this, not a partnership per se, but a way for you and Alex to connect that would show the world you've forgiven him. And I would hope that he would own it. I really would hope that he would go, you know what, Scarlett, I've never said this to you before, but I'm truly sorry personally because I did, you know, to whatever reason he wants to give it, he got carried away, whatever. But to say it, it's like I put this out there on a huge platform and it affected a lot of people. It affected me. I mean, and I don't look at myself as like I'm a victim of Alex Jones. Like, no, I believe in free speech too. Like he should be able to say whatever he wants. And when he got deplatformed, I was so against that. Like all the crazy nonsense that happened with the deplatforming of him. Not right, not fair, not good. But
So
anyway,
many people, you know, so many people, and I was against that as well. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, we've seen tons of censorship since then. He's like the OG guy to get deplatformed, and after him, it was like you just saw a lot of, when COVID happened, especially, there were so many people that got deplatformed just for talking. It was crazy. It was like, wait a minute, this is America. We're supposed to be able to talk, have opinions, and that's back to this theme, I think, of just the polarization. You know, if you have somebody, I don't know if anybody out there still believes that Sandy Hook didn't happen. Probably there's probably people that still doubt. I hope, you know, and I know we talked about this, I hope our story is at least a way for them to question that. Like, well, hey, if these people believed and then they questioned their way out of it, maybe I should start to question it too. Because again, you have to confront the evidence of human lives and of people who are affected. And, you know, I look back now and I think it's clear to see how I got caught up in the hysteria of it. But until I met you, I had no other avenue of you know, there's a biblical proverb. It says the first to present his case seems right until another comes and questions him. And so you were the other side of that coin for me. Like, okay, I've believed this, that this thing was a hoax and didn't happen. Oh, now there's a parent of a victim that I'm going to get to meet in person. Like, here we go. You know, let's, and just like Bonnie said, to hear you talk, to like listen to your story and then really think about it, it's like, oh my gosh, like I just can't believe I got led down that road, but I did.
I can't remember that. I mean, I remember the first dinner. I remember, you know, the environment actually, but I can't really remember the conversation. Were you guys asking me questions, trying to find the truth?
I remember specifically asking you if Adam Lanza had been on antidepressants because that was another thing I'd heard always, like all these school shooters are on antidepressants. And I remember we talked about that.
Yeah,
But
and I said probably no. And
yeah,
and you know, and that was because somebody told me that none of the school shooters were on antidepressants. And I find that not to be true. Years and years and years later, I'm so surprised that I just took that and ran with it myself, right? Somebody turned me off that path early on. And in actuality, it's not true. Some of them have been on antidepressants or having just gone off them. And I think that, you know, this is the thing, like for the last 12 years, I've tried to find out what the actual truth is as well. And I think that's actually something positive that's come out of COVID, all of these different avenues for news and the voices that have come up that are able to say what they want, and they're not part of the mainstream media who does mislead and has been proven not to be 100% honest. And I do think that as a human being, that's what we want to seek. In fact, that's one of the reasons that we're here, is to seek out the truth. And I don't think that Alex was really doing that. I think that it maybe in the beginning he was very interested, but then I think those shows did so well that it was maybe more of an entertainment factor. And you know, I was hoping maybe that trial, the Austin trial, remember there are two totally separate factions. And we want different things, by the way. Unfortunately, we're grouped together, but or we were, but I was really hoping that it would help Alex's platform, because you know, he had made some really good calls, and then the whole Sandy Hook thing, which really hurt his credibility with a lot of people. And
Yeah, it was so surreal watching that trial on TV, knowing you, knowing who Alex Jones is, and you guys are in the same room. It was like, oh, it was so surreal to watch. And when it was over, you know, seeing you near him, you know, and that you were willing to communicate with him and talk to him, and there was just a moment where you two were speaking after that, and you know, it was wild.
it was wild for me too, by the way. I think I felt probably exactly what you did. It was so surreal to me that I even had to be there. It was the first trial of its kind, you know, for a victim's parent to have to defend themselves. And it was extremely uncomfortable for me. I did not want to be there, but I felt like it was really important. And I felt like I had to defend the truth.
Were you able to get any impression of him at all? I mean, I'm sure you guys weren't like chit-chatting or anything, but did you get any impression of him yourself during that?
Oh, you know, when I was on the stand, and I was really kind of out of sorts because I was just discombobulated. And we took a break. Alex wasn't there; he was doing his show, and I think maybe they thought that we were done, so they called him back in. And actually, I was going on for the next part of my questioning on the stand. And so I came back thinking that he wouldn't be there, but he's right there sitting in front of me. And I learned so much from that situation, looking into his eyes and just seeing, you know, another human being that was scared. And as I was, by the way, being there, I didn't want to be there either, probably just as much as he didn't want to be there. And I just looked into his eyes and I saw humanity. You know, I felt a lot of compassion for him. And I learned, I'm always thinking about this formula that Bonnie was,
Just gonna say,
you know, earlier, and this is what we teach, all ages and stages. And for me, that really, you know, we always talk about how struggles help you learn and grow and be strengthened. For me, that really brought the forgiveness and compassion piece together for the first time in a way that I'd never experienced it, because I'm looking in his eyes. And I had already forgiven him. I was still working on forgiveness, but I had already made the choice to do that. But the compassion and love that I felt just solidified the forgiveness and just brought it all back full circle for me. And I still feel that way for him. I think, you know, he made a mistake. I've made mistakes in my life, big ones. And you know, I want forgiveness too, and I've asked for forgiveness. So you know, I think that I think that's definitely something that everyone deserves.
Yeah, and you know, I've heard Alex on a number of podcasts since, you know, he's been on Rogan's podcast and a bunch of others, and I've heard him say, you know, Sandy Hook happened, those kids were killed. Like he'll say that.
Yeah,
And I think that's at least a really good step in the right direction.
I do too.
What I can't stand is to hear the media still portray him as the Sandy Hook denier, Alex Jones. Like, okay, look, you could have said that at one time, maybe, but you can't keep saying that. Like the man has come forward and admitted at least that it happened. So stop treating him like he's filth. And that's the thing that's another thing that's been sort of the aftermath of COVID is watching I call it legacy media or mainstream media. The reason it's dying on the vine is because they're so deceptive in the way they present news And it's just a shame. You know, I hear a lot of people that worry about, you know, the demise of public institutions and the media. And it's true. It's sad that we can't trust those kinds of things the way we used to blindly. But the truth is we shouldn't. And they really took advantage of that. And to this day, they still sort of treat him that way. It's like if they're trying to hurt him, it's not working. It's like you're only helping him by showing how you're not even willing to at least report, like, well, yeah, he said that, but now he has said this. Like at least report the truth. Quit trying to smear the man, you know?
Totally agree with you. And you know, with those kids that sent me those letters, I actually wrote them back. I don't know if they ever got my response, but I told them for their homework, I wanted them to take a news article or, you know, some news from a right-leaning media outlet. And I wanted them to look for the same news item in a left-leaning media outlet. And I wanted them to compare the two. And I wanted them to look at what was left out, look at the opinions that were put in there, and just look at the difference. And I said, you know, I trust you all. You have to look for the truth these days. So you have to not just, you've got to read both of those, yes, but you have to look at other outlets as well. And I trust you all, and these were middle schoolers, more than I do the media outlets to figure out the truth. There's so many opinions now that go around masquerading as news. And I went to college for communication, and I took a news writing course. And I remember, you know, writing out my news article and then submitting it, and I got it back, and it had all of these red circles around it. And I walked up and I said, "What is wrong with this?" And the professor said, "Oh, those are all your opinions. You need to go back and state them as facts." And I was like, "I think these are facts." He's like, "They're not. They're your opinions. And nobody cares about your opinions. They're reading because they want the facts." And so that was what was drilled into my head at Boston University College of Communication. And now, you know, when I read, it's like, it's a lot of innuendo and opinion. And I honestly don't care what anybody else's opinion is. I just want the facts, and I trust myself to form my own opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, Bonnie, I've been hogging the conversation. Is there anything you want to say?
Oh, it's okay. This is typical, right, guys? No, I'm just kidding. You guys
It's
are
true.
so,
It's typical.
it's true. You guys have great conversations. I love to being able to chime in, but no, I'm so grateful. I mean, you know, I was going to say, I was looking at the formula again, and it's like, you know, watching you go through this process with the Alex Jones trial and everything that's been, you know, around that. I think it's you've demonstrated. I mean, I watched the trial too, and that was the main thing that I came away with, was that in that moment, you know, facing that pressure, that with enough practice and all these years that you've been able to do this, and, you know, surrounding yourself with a lot of support and encouragement in your life, that, you know, I watched you live the courage, gratitude, forgiveness, and compassion in action right there. And I was never so proud, you know, and I thought, and I thought, you know, I got some hope. I felt like I felt like there was hope. There was glimmers of hope, of, like, you know, humility, you know, with maybe Alex Jones, you know, humility, and you know, moving forward with, you know, possible problem solving. Again, you know, it's about solving the problems in what's going on in our society. And you know, so I mean, he has an amazing platform. I remember somebody, you know, at a school telling me that, you know, when you have that platform, when you have all the the ability to reach people and share a message, use it for the best good that you can. And I just saw a lot of hope there. It was really amazing. And
I did too, by the way. It's a huge responsibility that he has. And you have a lot of power and you have a lot of people listening to you. And you can use it for good. And if you can, why wouldn't you? And I think that, and he could continue to do that. And my hope was that this would make him stronger, stronger and a champion for the truth, because we really need somebody out there to be doing that.
Yeah, and I think again, to his credit, he has, I think, emerged in a way. This humbled him. I mean, going through this definitely humbled him. But I think that when you saw and it was weird, the timing was strange. Like the backlash against him, it came a time later, that like this became a bigger issue further from the event, and then the way that the whole media, everything, all of social, the way they got rid of him in one day, like wiped him off of all these platforms to try to silence him. The people that were willing to have him on, that was what I don't think they counted on. It's like, well, you can't stop him from being a guest on somebody else's. And so now he's been on Rogan and Tucker Carlson and all these big platforms. And he's in some ways bigger than he's ever been, And but I think he's changed. I mean, he can still be very hyperbolic and loud and all that. But when you listen to what he has to say, it's not all crazy. It's really not. Some of it's crazy. I mean, some of the things I hear him say, I think, well, okay, I don't buy into that. Like, that's pretty over the top. But sometimes he'll be talking about an event, and I think, well, that's an interesting perspective. Like, that's at least the benefit you should give the man, is to say, well, that's an interesting take. Like, I mean, it's not like he's just this total idiot. He's got some brain cells. He can be a smart guy. Sorry, Bonnie, I can see you're.
yeah, no, I'm sorry. I'm just, you guys are both like public speakers types, and I work with preschool kids, so sometimes my vocabulary doesn't quite catch up. But I think that when we're talking about truth, you know, where is truth? Because people see things differently. I learned that in my whole media literacy, New Mexico Media Literacy Project, is that we see different perspectives of things. So where is the truth? Yes, there are facts, there are absolute facts, but there's also the way that people see and perceive things, and how it makes us feel, and realizing that our feelings are not always reality. Sometimes our feelings are just feelings and they inform us, but then we have to make critical decisions with what those feelings are, and not just act out of or react out of our emotions. And so, when we hear things like that, like, oh, a crisis actor is coming, to speak to my school, it's like, or, or this never happened. And, all the tugging of the heartstrings, like, how could they possibly fake this? Those people are so awful, and that's what it was at the beginning. It was like, these people are faking it. How could they do that? Playing on the emotions and everything. And, in a way it can be acting. In a way it can be, what is the truth? How do we find the truth?
Yeah,
And
that's.
I was
Sorry,
just
go
gonna,
ahead, Scott.
well, I was just going to say, we in Choose Love, we call it the choice moment, where you hear something and you have an emotional response and you pause, you get curious about it, and that gives time for your prefrontal cortex, the highest and best version of yourself, where your critical thinking is, as well as the brake on your instinctual reactions, to come online. And we say that's where you can make a heroic choice, because it literally is, of choosing love.
Absolutely.
Yep.
That's amazing. That's that space, right? In between the stimulus and the response.
Victor
Or
Frank.
is it at the other side?
Well, it's the space, because when something happens, we have
Mhm.
two choices. We can react or we can thoughtfully respond. And the thoughtful response comes from the highest and best version of yourself, but you have to pause and think about it so that you can choose. And choice is our superpower. And so, do I think that, and I've been asked this too in the media, that Alex Jones has the ability to choose to do the right thing and to be a proponent of good and to champion love? I do. I do.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we all do.
absolutely.
We
Yeah.
absolutely all do.
Yeah. And that's the thing, love, to give it a definition, I always turn to scripture. 1 Corinthians chapter 13 is famously the love chapter. Love is patient, love is kind, does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it is not rude, it is not self-seeking. And it gets better, and it's escaping me, but it rejoices in the truth. That's one thing it does. And I think that's so true. And to Bonnie's point, finding out what's true is more difficult. It's funny, we have more information at our fingertips than ever, and it's harder than ever to discover the truth in anything.
That's interesting.
It is interesting. And
And
so,
that's why we're here, I think, to find what is true.
yeah, and I think when you do, you have to just land in a place of great grace for those who don't see it the way you see it. I have a close friend who, boy, he believes some things that I think are just completely crazy. But I love him, and I don't fault him for thinking that way, and I don't think he's a lesser person, and I don't think I'm better than him. And do I think some of the things he believes are crazy? Like, completely. But I get it. Look at what I believed. I thought your thing was a hoax. I thought you were a crisis actress. How crazy is that? It's like, how am I any different? So we have to extend grace to everyone, and especially those who we would Jesus said, love your enemies, which is, who says that? Who says that but him? Love your enemies, and that's not easy to do. And so, yeah,
And
I think
actually the strongest response.
what's that?
That's actually the strongest response that you can have.
Yeah, to love your enemy. Yeah. If your enemy is thirsty, give him something to drink. If he's hungry, feed him. Yeah, that's the way the world will move ahead and survive, is to cultivate our love for each other and to forgive each other and to have that courage and the compassion, to quote your formula. Those are all wonderful things. And yeah, and I want to convey, Scarlett, the true depth of my own sorrow, having to Bonnie's point earlier about how it must have hurt. I think about you losing your son at 6 years old, who, he did the most loving thing anyone can do. No greater love is this than one lay down his life for his friends, which is exactly what he did. And it's like, that's he's a saint, you know? And I know one day I'll get to meet him. And yeah, but I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what we, thought. And I'm grateful for your forgiveness and your compassion.
Thank you all for that. And I'm so grateful that you agreed. And I know that it wasn't an easy decision to come on the Choose Love podcast, but I really appreciate your courage. And I wanted to have this conversation because I think it's very important that people hear the other side and also see that we can mend fences, that we can build bridges, that forgiveness is a thing and it works. And if we keep an open heart and an open mind, I mean, I absolutely adore both of you. You know that you are like my best friends in the whole world. And I'm so grateful for you. And you have so loved and supported me throughout, the years, and as well as the Choose Love movement. And I am so grateful for both of you. And I'm so grateful that, I mean, my gosh, we get to have this conversation, which is really amazing. And, thank you. And I really hope that it inspires our listeners to take a breath. When you hear somebody talking and it triggers you, or you think that you're right, take a deep breath, pause in what we call that choice moment, allow your prefrontal cortex to come online. I always like to say, get curious and not furious, or I like even better, become fascinated, not frustrated, which is exactly what I did when you guys told me. I wanted to know what the thinking was behind that, and how and why. You were in very good company, because in my trial, it came out that 1 in 5 people doubted the facts around Sandy Hook. So I just wanted to know how and why, and ultimately, having this conversation, I think, was worth everything, because the talk about truth and honesty and courage and vulnerability, you guys have shown that here, and love. And I love you both, and I'm so appreciative that we could share this with the world.
Amen, sister.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely.
Yep.
We
Thanks for
love you
having us.
too.
Yeah, we do love you. Thank you so much for having us on your podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scarlett.
Hey, oh. It's all part of us. We can all choose love. It'll lift you up if you